Hello, mindful friends. Today we're going to be talking about how we can handle difficult situations and difficult people by expanding into our true selves and our bigger selves instead of contracting into our smaller self in those situations. So when we deal with trouble in our lives or people who are difficult for us, what we tend to do is shrink ourselves down to the level of the situation. So if someone is yelling at us or approaching us with, kind of small-minded behavior, we tend to shrink down to their level and communicate and interact in the way that they are communicating with us. And what this does is this brings us out of our power and makes us smaller. And we do that because we're trying to relate to the situation, handle the situation. And it seems that if we kind of put ourselves in the same behavior that they are, that's what's necessary to work through that interaction. So someone comes to us and sends a really nasty email or says something really unkind. What's our first reaction? Is to send a nasty email back or respond with just as nasty of a comment back to them. But what you just did when you did that was come from this larger self and this expansive self and shrink down into where they were. So you just put yourself down on their level instead of pausing, breathing, taking a step back, and expanding. And asking yourself, what would my higher self or my expansive self do in this situation? And typically it's a really different response than one that kind of mirrors the situation you were just given. That can also be kind of applied to difficulties in your life. If you're going through something really hard, we can feel fear and anxiety or anger, and all of those emotions, if we act out of them, make us smaller. So take away our power. And they kind of bring us back into a more primitive way of responding to the situation. And when we interact with our world or our environment or our experience from these smaller emotions, we act in small ways. So when we act out of fear, we're really contracting inwards and we're limiting ourselves. And we're really saying, I don't trust you to handle this well, so I'm afraid of what will happen. And typically that goes into like self-protect mode. We shrink inwards, we don't reach out as much, we don't connect. And that makes us deal with that experience in a way that limits us rather than expands us. So what we can do in those situations where it's either difficult in an interaction with somebody or the world is presenting us with a challenge is to expand instead of contract. So ask ourselves, what could I do here that would bring out my biggest, best self? How could I use this experience to grow larger rather than contract inwards? And we also notice that in these situations, if we feel one of these kind of limiting emotions, we almost always revert back to behavior or words that mimic the age we were when we first experienced this, or when we had the kind of our biggest experience with this emotion or this difficulty. So someone says something that hurts you, what do? It's like, if we go into those emotions, we almost always revert back to like our middle school selves, right? When we retaliate and we say something petty and mean back. Or in an experience where we're struggling and maybe we're failing at something or it's not working out like we want. If we go into that anger, it almost reverts us back as well into like sometimes elementary school self, where we have a tantrum and we get really exaggeratedly angry and frustrated. And these are our limiting behaviors and emotions and thoughts that turn us into a younger self, a smaller self. But when we're there and we're this smaller version of us or this younger version of us, we don't have the tools to come at this experience in a positive, healthy way. And negativity affects us a heck of a lot more. So you think about if you apply force to like a small little wall, right? Like a one you built out of sand and it's tiny. If you apply a force to that, it's going to affect it a lot more, right? It's going to push it down or move it back than if you apply force to, the Great Wall of China. Then that force doesn't affect that wall as much. So it's the same with us. If in those moments where somebody says something that attacks us and we revert back to being our small self, the words that they say affect us a lot. A lot. We take it personal, we take it on as our identity, we feel like we have to retaliate. We retaliate in a way that's like our middle school self, and nothing good comes of it. Same thing with an experience. Something really hard is happening in our life. Maybe we've lost something we really wanted, or something isn't quite working out the way we had planned. If we revert back into our small self, it affects us a lot. We take on that identity of failure. We feel deflated and defeated and disappointed. And we have a harder time coming out of that difficult experience and growing from it. Whereas if instead, when that happens and we have a hard interaction with somebody or we have a hard situation to deal with, we ask ourselves, how can I expand here? How can I be my higher self here? And we speak out of truth and out of our heart and out of our compassion. Now the energy or the effect of this kind of negative experience is much, much smaller on our expanded self. In fact, it hardly touches us at all. And we can stand there in our power and respond in ways that benefit us, that serve us and the other person, and help expansion to happen all around us in our world. So in ourself, but then also in whoever or whatever else is involved in this experience. And now we have used this difficult situation to actually empower us further, because we just learned how to stay expansive and large and within our own power, even when difficulty was present. And this makes us even stronger, so that the next time difficulty arises, it affects us a little bit less, and we're able to stay a little bit bigger. And each time that it happens, and we make the choice to stay large, or like the old saying, be the bigger person. And yes, sometimes it's hard. We want to revert back. We want to act like the middle schooler. We want to be more petty, but we don't. And we choose to stay large. That helps us grow even further. And then again, next time it won't affect us quite as much. And it'll get easier and easier to stay large. But in those moments, we have to be aware, okay, I'm reverting back, I'm allowing myself to get small, and how can I expand? How can I stay in my true self? How can I honor my true values here? So I invite you this week, look into those things in your life, whether they're how somebody's treating you or an experience you're having, and ask yourself, am I getting small here and reverting back to behavior that doesn't reflect my heart's truth, my strength, my power? And how could I stay in this situation and expand? Stay here and act out of my heart, out of my compassion, showing my true values even in this hard situation. And notice that that makes it easier and easier for you to expand even further and stay in your power. If you enjoy these little talks and would like to join us for a group session or individual coaching, you can visit us at newleafmindfulness.com. And don't forget to like and share. I hope to see you all very soon.